Unalienable rights. Theme of American civilization. The First Amendment of the American Constitution guarantees freedom of expression, a right that has been defended since America's infancy. Despite its intrinsic role in society, freedom of speech has been questioned in the first decade or so of the 21st century. The 2010 Supreme Court case Citizens United versus the Federal Elections Commission gave corporations the right to free speech without making it clear who held responsibility for the consequences. Hillary, the movie, was released in January of 2008. The non-profit organization Citizens United created this film to publicize their opinion on Hillary Clinton's qualifications for presidency. Recognizing a political nature, the Federal Elections Commission stated that the film was considered a political advertisement. Therefore, producing it broke the laws limiting financial contributions to campaigns. When appealing the film's validity in a federal court didn't work, Citizens United appealed to the Supreme Court, where in 2010, the case became one of the most controversial rulings of the decade. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of corporate personhood, granting corporations rights as individuals under the First Amendment. The ruling was undoubtedly plausible in context. After all, corporate personhood had been promoted since 1886 in the case of Santa Clara County versus the Southern Pacific Railroad, where the 14th Amendment was interpreted to ensure that corporations would receive the same treatment from the government as the citizens who fabricate them. From a constitutional standpoint, a corporation is best considered an individual. This aids in the government's role in esteeming corporate integrity. For example, if corporations were not individuals, corporate bodies would not be subject to guidelines of other constitutional amendments. Could corporate offices be searched without a warrant? How would the government maintain responsibility for what is published in corporate magazines? Would corporations even be subject to provisions of the Patriot Act? If not, corporate emails and phone lines could arguably be withheld from government surveillance, as well as their banking and financial behavior becoming immune to facilitation.
Look, the premise is freedom of speech. The more speech, the better. I cannot understand why. And as far as Citizens United, don't forget, Citizens United was not novel. It reversed an opinion 8 years earlier that had changed the law from what the law had been.
In the case of Citizens United versus the FEC, attention was called specifically to the rights concerning freedom of expression, and while in context the ruling was plausible, in its implied state, the Supreme Court's decision resulted in given rights for which the responsibility is unmanned.
This week, the United States Supreme Court handed a huge victory to the special interests and their lobbyists, and a powerful blow to our efforts to rein in corporate influence. This ruling strikes at our democracy itself. By a 5-4 vote, the court overturned more than a century of law, including a bipartisan campaign finance law written by Senators John McCain and Russ Feingold that had barred corporations from using their financial clout to directly interfere with elections by running advertisements for or against candidates in the crucial closing weeks.
In the case of Citizens United versus the FEC, attention was called specifically to the rights concerning freedom of expression, and while in context the ruling was plausible, in its implied state, the Supreme Court's decision resulted in given rights for which the responsibility is unmanned. Financial contributions to political campaigns are considered a means of expression. The First Amendment guarantees individuals freedom of expression. Together, these two statements mean that individuals can donate money to try and get their preferred candidate elected. While fair in theory, blatant unequal monetary distribution sets many voters at a disadvantage. The Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, BCRA, of 2002 was an attempt to regulate the scene. It banned corporations from donating to political parties, indirectly to the candidate, and capped individual contributions at $2,000 per individual. Most importantly, the BCRA restricted independent expenditures from unions and corporations. Citizens United versus the FEC overturned this last provision, causing political uproar that has yet to be soothed. The 2011 movement Occupy Wall Street is a prime example. Hundreds of university students and union members flooded the financial district of New York City, assembling in protest of corporate money's influence on the government.
What the Supreme Court did in Citizens United is say to these same billionaires, you own and control the economy, you own Wall Street, you own the coal companies, you own the oil companies. Now, for a very small percentage of your wealth, we're going to give you the opportunity to own the United States government. That is the essence of what Citizens United is all about, and that is why it must be overturned.
Corporate personhood in terms of campaign finance is a right that brings forth an extensive set of questions regarding responsibility. Examine the system of a corporation. If a corporation's political system was democratic, the personhood, so to speak, of the corporation would agreeably represent the sentiment of all members. However, realistically, a corporation's political system most resembles an oligarchy, ruled by the affluent few. A CEO or board of directors makes the ultimate decisions. If someone of prominence in the company chooses to enact corporate personhood and make a public statement, it is unlikely that all employees of that company share the same opinion. Salary, race, gender, religious affiliation, and values diverge across corporate statuses and participating citizen shareholders. Within such a wide range of individuals, political opinions are bound to vary.
Citizens United happened in 2012. That was a game changer. And in the very next election year, in 2012, that is when we passed the billion mark. So clearly, you have to pay to play. Now, conservative groups are spending huge amounts more on our elections than liberal groups. In 2012, conservative groups spent nearly $720 million. Liberal groups, on the other hand, spent less than half of that. But as we know, President Obama was reelected to a second term, and much of those super PAC funds were directed at attacking him. So the investment for big donors and corporations doesn't always pay off.
But how valid is the argument of using money to pull political strings? Despite the gap in campaign donations for the 2012 election, Barack Obama, the presidential candidate with the least amount of donations, managed to win. Was it presidential incumbency putting him at an advantage? Or are American voters truly loyal to their beliefs, unwilling to let bought efforts persuade them? In future elections, it will become apparent whether financial implications of Citizens United versus the FEC interrupts the American will. At that point, it will be not only judicial but citizen responsibility to reclaim the rights that they want. As decided by our founding fathers, the government is responsible for governing the people, providing rights, and verifying execution of those rights. Freedom of expression was the First Amendment made to the Constitution, as it is, infallibly, a natural right.
Breaking news is coming out of the U.S. Supreme Court in a 5-4 ruling. The court struck down current limits on the total amount individual donors can make to political campaigns. The decision may have immediate impact.
Duly granted to citizens and extended to large groups, it is the responsibility of corporate America and political leaders to uphold the integrity that merits the right to freedom of expression.